Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Friday, July 3rd, 2026, episode 537, Making Assassinations Great Again, MAGA. Yeah. Well, anyway, it's the eve of the July 4th weekend, so we got to talk assassinations, right? It's a little bit, I guess it came to me only because I was listening to, once again, Trump bragging about how he murdered all these people, and also because it's the Ayatollah's funeral today. And Larry Johnson was speculating on a podcast as to whether or not Israel would bomb the funeral because there are so many important people, heads of state, at that funeral. And the conclusion was Israel wouldn't be that crazy to do it. Uh, but they might be, but I think the funeral's over now. And so the likelihood of that happening, otherwise I would have heard something, I guess. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, because I really liked the movie series Bourne Identity, mostly because it was so cool how he was creative with his use of weapons, etc. So it wasn't so much about shooting as it was about his fighting. Now, Jason Bourne, played by Matt Damon, the reason why it was kind of controversial and edgy at the time it came out was because it was kind of hinting at the fact that the United States carries out assassinations on the sly, right? So they would assassinate people all over the world, uh, uh, depending on how convenient it was to simply carry out an assassination, but they did it in a way that it looked like an accident, right? Because you don't want people to know that the US is directly involved in the death of a head of state, right? You don't want the United States to be open to criticism because, after all, assassination of heads of state or assassination in general is illegal. It's called murder. All right. So, the United States, though, we get to, or we lived under the fiction and illusion that the United States doesn't get involved in this kind of thing. Like the United States is clean, the United States is good, we're righteous over here, so we don't get involved in all of this dirty work overseas, and don't even think about the United States doing nefarious things here in the United States. Well, it's kind of a nice fiction if you want to believe that. And I did for a very long time. Like, we're the good guys. We don't do this kind of stuff. But it is a fiction. The United States funds overthrows, coups, assassinations, revolutions, revolts all over the world. They'll fund opposition groups. They'll even fund um, groups that the United States doesn't get along with, that is identified as being terrorist organizations, but they'll fund them simply because it's convenient. I mean, it's so ridiculous, and there's just so much money floating around in the US government that in Syria at one point, the FBI funded terrorists were fighting against the CIA funded terrorists, right? And so you had this thing where what? And it was kind of and it gets crazier than that. That's not even that's something that I'll mention in class, and people will say, "Oh yeah, I guess that could happen." Yeah, but when you go further, it just gets so crazy that people just their brain just shuts down. They can't process just how evil the United States government would be. So I often say that the United States prints so much currency that they could fund an entire nation, just pay off everyone in a country. And it shouldn't surprise us that basically the Ukraine and Israel are only functioning as a country because the United States pays all of its bills, pays all of its workers, just basically pays off everybody. At the same time, right? So the Ukraine, all of their money comes from the United States, and Israel, all of their money comes from the United States as well. And I should add that, organizations like APAC or any kind of special interest group, super PAC, whatever, that operates in the United States in favor of those countries are funded by our money, right? So we send them money, they take a portion of that and they recycle it back into the United States to make sure that the funds keep on coming, which I don't know if you think that that is a totally legitimate use of our tax dollars, but for me, it's just kind of weird. It's like, why are we doing this? We are funding uh, countries so that they have money to persuade people in Congress to continue funding them. I have to laugh because it is kind of ridiculous. And at this point, the news is just so dark and so incredibly full of stupidity that one wonders how we get out of this. I mean, even in Venezuela, how did the United States kidnap Maduro so easily? Some people might say it wasn't that easy. Well, it was figuratively, I mean, comparatively speaking, it was pretty easy. And the way they were able to do it was because they paid off all of the right people. And so instead of fighting the US forces as they came into the country, they just simply waltzed right in. So how is it that the US government has all of this money to just simply, excuse me, fiat currency to throw around all over the world? It's just insane. But it gets worse. Now we have a president who openly brags about killing the leaders of other countries. I don't know if you remember Obama when he bragged that he had a kill list, but he didn't, brag about specific people that he took out. And although we can speculate, now Trump openly admits that he's taken out several people even before the Ayatollah. And it's just kind of insane to me, right? Because the whole premise of the Jason Bourne series was that the United States was conducting all of these shady affairs, illegal things, but they did it so well that they made it look like accidents. Well, it's just not an accident anymore. Now, if you might be sitting there thinking, what's the big deal? Well, imagine if instead of you replace the country. So instead of saying the leaders of Iran, why don't we just say the leader of the United States, right? So if we have a situation where another country is taking out leaders of the United States, would the American people stand for that? Would they be okay with that? It's like, well, yeah, I guess they had to go. Of course not. And so the fact that so many people are okay with taking out leaders of other countries and then to sit there and say, why are they so upset? They were bad people. It's just so rich. And what I mean by that is it's all hypocrisy. So it should be obvious that the freedom or democracy, the free elections or following the will of the people that the government says they are supporting, right? That's why they carried out these assassinations. Yet that those are all fictions. These are the words that the United States uses to deceive the American people. Again, as I building on what I said yesterday, we are so propagandized that we hear certain words and we get warm fuzzies in our heart. At least I did when I would hear words like freedom. We're doing it for freedom. Yeah, sure, because we're so awesome. We're spreading freedom, Operation Freedom. And that's when I began to wonder. I was filled with all this patriotism and then started hearing stories about how the people were rejecting everything that the US was doing in that country. And that I started going down the rabbit hole and it should have been obvious, but again, I was so propagandized, just like everybody else, that it took me a while to figure out that sure, they just blew up your family, and then they say, here's some freedom. Aren't you happy now? Uh, Without ever discussing all of the people who died in the process. Like there was no better way to do this. Uh, so I went from who doesn't like freedom to, yeah, that's not freedom. And unfortunately, Trump is able to get away with this with a lot of people, particularly people who are still blindly following him, is because the trend is that killing people is not a big deal, especially when it's not you or people that you know. And so the trend right now is to be cavalier or to just talk about taking the life of other people, taking the lives of other people in such a casual kind of way. So the death of people in war is not a big deal unless they are American. So thousands of people die, tens of thousands of people may die, hundreds of thousands of people die in another country. No big deal. It's okay. Part of war. But then when we look at like a handful of 12 American deaths, people freak out. How many Ukrainians have died? How many Russians have died? How many civilians have died on both sides? And just so everyone is on the same page, uh, Ukrainian civilians, when they die in attacks from Russia, well, they probably posted a video of themselves making a drone in their living room, and so they become a target. So are they really civilian targets if they are putting together weapons that are used to kill Russian civilians in Moscow? I don't know. That's not for me to figure out, but I can understand why people would get sort of bent out of shape, but also to realize that there's more to talk about here. And it's hard to know just exactly how many have died because of all the propaganda and how lies are the standard fare when there's a war. But some of the people who have I listened to have come up with their numbers by counting the names of the people who died in the respective countries. And the name lists are quite long. So people in America, however, don't really think about that, right? Because we don't know any of those people. At least I don't. And most people who are pretty either neutral or really don't care because they don't know anyone. And it, but it makes it so disturbing. It's so disturbing to me that Trump would order strikes, that is, take action that results in more deaths simply to get a better negotiating position. He didn't like what he had, so in order to have at least a little bit of leverage, he orders attacks, which results in more death. And for him to talk about it in such a way uh, would make me angry if my son died in an attack that was ordered by Trump. I would be livid. And then to hear him be so casual about it, like, oh, I did it because I can do it. Oh, it would send me to the moon. So we have to ask, what is the value of human life? Is it nothing when it is racialized to be our enemy? What is the value of human life? I've talked about this before in terms of insurance rates. Like, what is the value of your life depends largely on your income, yeah, and how much you've saved, right? Your net worth, as it were. Are human lives less valuable because they are lives from a country that is so-called inferior to the United States? Are the lives there uh, worth less? And if you're one of those people who are sitting there saying, well, they're just Iranian or they're just Hezbollah or they're just Hamas, well, you're being racist, right? So if we were to just replace Iranian with black or white or gay, whatever, then yeah, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a generalization of a very diverse group of people, and we don't care, right? Well, that's just racist. It's racist behavior. And so when I say we're all racists, I do mean that. Um, and it's getting more and more easy to hear this kind of talk today. A few years ago, it was kill the Nazis or punch the Nazis because they're not really human until you start to examine who the Nazis are. And it turns out that the Nazis are the ones that are promoting the killing of Nazis, and the people that they have targeted are not necessarily Nazis or the kind of person that you might think they are. And I told the story before, but in case you didn't go back and you didn't listen or you forgot, I had a student once when I asked the question in class, is it okay to punch a Nazi? And he was like, yeah, man, yeah, you gotta punch them in the face. And so I asked him, what's a Nazi? And he was stumped. He was stumped. And I give him credit that he didn't turn around and start arguing with me, but I broke it down. I explained to him where the word came from. First two syllables of the German pronunciation of national, which is national, right? But who wants to say the entire name of Hitler's political party, right? Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterspartei, right? Who wants to say that every time? All right, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, right? Who wants to say that every single time? You don't want to, and so you just say Nazi. That's where it comes from. And so Nazis are socialists, you know. It's so crazy, right? So to talk about people who are advocating freedom like me and call people like me Nazi is really rich. I mean, it's really interesting. So what are we really even talking about? No one even really knows. We just are going by cues and instructions that we're getting from other people and just going along with it. Action movies, I put the blame on a lot of action movies. Now, I love action movies, and I began to know this just a while ago, they cultivate a retribution mindset. They cultivate and foster vengeance, like, oh, I'm going to get revenge, where justice can only be served through murder and murdering a lot of people. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, but that's because you're living in a world where there cannot be any justice. But that's not our world. It's not our world. Think about, and in case you were saying, but oh, there's no way to get justice in Iran. We put a leader of Al Qaeda as president of Syria. The United States government made Al Qaeda president of Syria. Come on. That's justice? Really? Whatever happened to that being a crime to collaborate and help and associate with terrorists? I don't know. It seems like hypocrisy to me. And so, but with all these action movies, as long as someone is dying, people feel pretty good. What's not examined is the collateral damage. I started doing this the other day where all those guys that would die in this rampage of retribution, like the John Wick movies. What about that guy and his family? And we so easily dismiss it as saying, well, he made his choice. He could have gotten another job. Really? Hmm. Maybe sometimes, but all of them? I don't know. Uh, in order to maintain a easy conscience, we have to say that Good is always right. They can't make any mistakes. And good is invincible. And so a lot of people who consume these movies, like the United States, like people who live in America, pretty much imagine themselves like this. And even opponents of the United States imagine themselves in the same way. They're the underdog. They're fighting David and Goliath type battles. So they're never going to give up either. Now, as long as we are a member of the group in power, no one really thinks about it too much. But it's the bully problem. And I've talked about this before, but it's the schoolyard bully. Yeah, you're the biggest, you're the meanest, you're the toughest. No one can beat you in a fight. But how long are you going to stay on top? How long are you planning on staying in high school? And even if you make it to Congress and you have this bully attitude and you pass all these rules and laws to make sure that you can bully way into your 80s, I think I mentioned that I saw this bit, a comedy bit where uh, so many members of Congress are over 80 and pretty much non-functional. They're no longer independent, but they're wheelchaired out to the floor of Congress to make their vote. They have no idea where they are. But anyway, um, as long as you are in power, everything's okay. And it's the bully problem. How long can you stay on top? And the United States is able to do what it has for the last 70 years at least because of the strength of the dollar. Well, those days are coming to an end. You know, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talking about a gold valuation reset. That's supposed to happen tomorrow. I don't know what the probability is, but I mean, it's possible. What happens to the rest of us when that happens? What happens to the dollar? Last time they did a revaluation of the dollar of gold in dollar terms, the inflation was twice as much as the inflation of the value of the dollar when they reset the dollar price, when they raised it to match a more reasonable dollar gold price. Well, the inflation was twice the percentage increase. So I don't know. They're talking about changing the value of an ounce of gold from 40 something, $42 to $4,200. So that's what? That's 100 times. Is that right? Oh, my math is failing me. Uh, oops. Let me do this real quick. It's 100 times, right? Yeah, it's 100 times. So a 200% inflation increase. I don't know if, I mean, people are talking about 2%. Imagine 200%. And you know, when that ball gets rolling, how do you stop it? Well, that's a whole nother can of worms, but hopefully that'll give you an idea of how I connect the dots and how I see that because assassinations are now an open topic, like we can freely admit it now, what are some of the implications of that phenomena? That's it. And I will talk to you on Sunday. And if not Sunday, then on Monday. Have a great weekend.